Well, everybody, so nice to have you here. People are
Yeah,
starting to.
no, it'll be in about 5-10 minutes.
Yep, yep. So we are talking on. What are we talking on today? May I be happy? Chapter 7. And so as we get started, let's just do some opening prayers just to kind of get our minds in the right spot. So we'll do 4 measurables, and we'll just do this one time through real quick just to make it easy on everybody. May all beings attain happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all beings never be separated from joy that is free of misery. And may all beings abide in equanimity, free from bias of attachment and aversion. You know what? Let's do it 2 more times. I think I need it today. May all beings attain happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all beings never be separated from joy that is free of misery. May all beings abide in equanimity, free from bias of attachment and aversion. May all beings attain happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all beings never be separated from joy that is free of misery. May all beings abide in equanimity, free from bias of attachment and aversion. All right, thank you, everybody. Wow, so good to see everybody. We are week 9 into our program? I mean, we are chugging along with the best of everybody. So as we are moving forward, I just want to check in. Does anybody have anything from last week on getting unstuck that they are still working with or want to bring up? I'm not hearing anything, so I think we're good to go. And then I'm gonna, I don't know if Andrea or Nicole, if you could just watch the chats today while we're going through, just in case I missed something. Okay, thanks. Nicole's got it. Well, this week we're getting into caring for ourselves, and I feel like we actually spent a couple of weeks doing this a while back, kind of really looking at some of the obstacles I think that we had. And so I'm glad that we're returning to it, because I think, I don't know about the rest of you all, but I feel like this is something that's good to kind of come back to time and time again, because as it said, kind of at that last little section, replenishing our inner wellspring. I think sometimes we go through life and we're just pulled in 1,000 different directions and asked to do 1,000 different things, and sometimes we just feel spent. And I think it's nice to be able to just come back, and to be kind to ourselves, to be compassionate to ourselves. So, and that's what this chapter is all about, caring for ourselves, because as that quote said, um, uh, from Tsongkhapa, if I do not have peace myself, how can I help others find it? And I think a lot of times, especially for those of us who are in service industries, so and you may consider yourself, or not consider yourself in a service industry, but if you are serving others, to if your vocation is to help other people, I think you can quickly feel depleted. There's a lot of times people are, what you do is so needed and important that you find yourself drawn into something, even when you feel like you're starting to get tapped out. And this usually is when people burn out. And I think of, like, right now, these last 2 years with folks like nursing and healthcare, and social workers who have just been kind of on the front line, people who are in like retail or the restaurant businesses. My wife works for a record store. She was kind of got laid off for a little bit, but she had to go right back to work. She couldn't just take time off. She's not like me and can work from home and not really be impacted vocationally. But I think also a lot of times when people have shifted from kind of in place to home work environments, all of a sudden they feel isolated, and they feel really drained because sometimes people, that wellspring, that caring for ourselves is also a dynamic relationship with others. And, maybe it's with friends or colleagues and things like that. So I think we can all probably relate to this chapter a little bit more. Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Am I missing the boat on this one? Yeah, Fanny, go for it.
So I'm taking a class, I'm auditing. The nice thing about being semi-retired, I'm taking a class at UMKC on Holocaust studies, like what led up to that. And in the class, the 20-year-old students, the next generation, are doing presentations. And one of the people in the class, she was like running a little bit late, and we were running up the stairs, and she would, we were both kind of catching our breath. We get in the class. She's called upon right away to do her presentation. And she goes into all of a sudden, everything shut down. She she didn't have the ability to present. The class was there. I was watching my friend who's the teacher, how, that dynamic of like, do I say something? I'm so drawn to just go over, just breathe, hang in there. You've prepared your stuff. You're good, So I think self-care also allows for the space to be able to be present. I didn't know that was happening. I go to this class for, my education, and then here's somebody. So I just took her out of the room. I said, do you want to go out? She was stuttering. And then we sat outside and we did some Shanae. I taught her some Shanae. And then I said, I'd love to hear what you were going to present, because the reason I'm taking this class is exactly what it was, right at the point of like the rise of Nazism, So she started to read, and there was her language. And then I said, let's go back to class. Let's, when you're ready, if you're ready, no pressure. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that class was nurturing me because of my interest. And then here, you never know where you're needed. And then what do? Not, assist. I mean, do you not assist? I could have kept quiet, and just say, okay, let me see. And I think it actually caused everybody else to have to practice patience, because the teacher didn't right away try to say, do you want me to read for you? Do you want me, fix it? So there's a good 10, 15 minutes of just quiet, and where she was trying to make an attempt, but it wasn't coming out. I don't know. And I watched what was coming up, and for me, like, oh my God, this is torture for her. I just want to say, chill, fast forward 40 years. Doesn't matter if you do well in the class or not, at the end of the day. So my point is the self-care practices. I don't know, that filled me for self-care, but then again, I wasn't running here and there. I had a lot of space to sit in a classroom, and I don't know, stuff comes up. So
Yeah,
it's a little connected, but that was sort of a powerful experience for me. And
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. What a great example. And I see, I believe Alice. Yep, there you are. Got your hand up.
Good evening. I wanted to respond to the comment that you made about it being the COVID throwing us into a kind of a different reality that none of us really have ever experienced before. For me, I'm a type B personality. So my friendships and my interactions were very important to supporting my happiness in my life. And when COVID hit and all of a sudden all of that disappeared, when my social life disappeared, when my personal interactions with others was limited to Zoom as opposed to one-on-one, even with family members, it became a period of time for me to understand what being alone is like, and what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, and being able to how do I want to put it? Being able to quietly go inside and take a little bit closer look at who I am and what it was I wanted from life and how I was going to get what I needed to survive during a time when there was very little resources available to me, until Zoom came along and we all started to do that. And even with Zoom, it only satisfies a small portion of that need to interact with others, to create those close relationships that are necessary. So then self-compassion, self-care became more important. And that's where I realized that I'm a rather critical person. Critical of you and critical of me. And it was a rather eye-opening experience, which in the long run, I think is going to be good for my own personal growth. But I really hated the last 2 years, the isolation.
Yeah. Yeah, not to call out anybody, but Daniel did a really wonderful. We had shared it on social media. He did this. It was like 30 seconds of this like talk about kind of the end of isolation. You know, where we kind of had this chance to pull out of it last year, and then of course with Omicron and everything in the fall, we had to kind of go back into it for many of us. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought of myself as really an introvert and not a very social person. So like if I had imagined COVID, I wouldn't have thought of how hard it would be for me. But then I realized, oh, I like socializing a lot more than I think I do. And it took all of this for me to realize that. But then I realized, oh no, I value that a lot. And I never thought I did.
Yeah, somebody shared a thing because they're introverted too, and they were like, what they realized was they enjoy being around people as long as they're in their corner, but they're still in kind of proximity to others, you know, so that they could interact on their terms, you know. And unfortunately, with like COVID and kind of the shutdowns, you know, it was just a solid wall, like, you know, you're not seeing anybody. But yeah, great stuff. Anything else? Anything in chat? Nothing. Okay. Oh, Derek, go ahead. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, not to take too much space up here, but I kind of had the opposite, where I thought I was pretty extroverted and then found out that no, I actually like being isolated out here. And that, you know, maybe the way that I had been engaged socially up until this point was more of a detriment than it was a positive to my mental health and the way I held up. But you know, that also lent itself though to, you know, being in a partnership with somebody that was very much extroverted and was suffering immensely from the isolation. And I mean, it's just a, you know, the pandemic is a terrible, terrible situation, but at the same time, I'm very, very grateful for a lot of the lessons that I think came out of it that I don't know if I'd ever had the opportunity to really have to sit with and learn had that not taken place, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this chapter definitely, through all of those lessons, this was something that was really good for me to, and probably I should read this chapter like every other week just to stay on top of it. But it meant a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of great practices this chapter, you know. And if anyone's read the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, there's also, of course, that video Mission Joy. But you know, that's one of the pillars of joy, is also this notion of forgiveness and kind of, you know, letting go of kind of a lot of that stuff, you know. So when people are talking about like going through the pandemic and the struggles, you know, a lot of there was a lot of, and they mentioned in this book, which I thought was interesting, because they use the word mourning, right? Mourning the loss, right? And I'm wondering, I mean, do you all feel like that? I mean, because looking back, I'm like, yeah, you know, there was kind of like when the Remy Center closed, and I was like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And there was like a couple of months where we weren't doing anything, and you know, it's and then we moved to a new building. So, you know, people didn't really have a chance to kind of say goodbye to our old building, and now we're in a new building. I don't know. Do you think that term mourning is good use of? Andrea, yeah, I saw your hand go up.
To me, when I hear mourning, it sounds so much more gentle than the usual things that come up when you were less than you would have liked to be in a situation, or you do something you later regret. It feels very gentle and accepting. And I really was drawn to the meditation you picked out for the Sunday of forgiving ourselves. Less than the accepting myself. So anyway, I guess the forgiving myself is where I'm at here. But yeah, I think the mourning around that is so gentle and kind. And it's amazing how a little turn of a language can evoke that, at least from me. I'd be curious about others.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Nicole, I saw your hand go up, and then Derek.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I love that term, mourning, but you know, one of the things that's, for me anyway, whenever I've gone through periods of grief or mourning or loss, it's never been like a linear path. It's almost been like a spiral where I come back to it again. And I found myself just a few days ago, you bring up the Remay Center, I drove past there and I'm like, God, like, there was a heart pang. I kind of missed the place, but yet I'm excited about the new one. And I think for me, that's just kind of an important thing that, you know, as I'm going through any sort of mourning, it's just not a one-off that I'm through it and done. It comes back, it has a new season, and it's not the same perspective as it was when it first hit, but maybe still, you know, tugs at my heart a bit. I don't even want to say it stings. It just sort of is like, oh yeah, that's right, you know.
Yeah, thank you. Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate whenever the idea of mourning comes up. You know, a lot of the teachings of Lama Marad's given that I've experienced, I've been incredibly grateful for that, because it's really kind of made me realize something that I think was really short-circuiting me for a long time in my life, where that, you know, I without realizing it, I had this baseline concept of I should just be bumping along and taking the lumps as they come, and especially at the pace life will move it sometimes, and, you know, tragedy happening to myself or those around me or just the world in general, that it was never an idea that was just sort of naturally came to mind that I need to make a little space and a little bit of time to really just kind of, you know, sort of grieve over circumstances, and not even massive ones, but just, you know, situations. There was a member on my team at work today that, you know, him and his family are going through a lot of stuff, and he's doing an incredible job holding it all together and shouldering that stuff. But, you know, he came to me to apologize for some things, and I was like, man, you're good. Let's hold some space for how much trouble you're having. And, you know, just him having that permission to take a second and just kind of feel those feels and take the time to do that. It was really powerful just to watch kind of the whole thing wash over him for a second, to even realize that, oh, that's something that it's okay for me to do. And I think not just okay, but healthy, because if you don't take that time to grieve, those things are going to catch up with you eventually, and they're going to express themselves in ways that are going to be much more detrimental than really taking the time to sort of intentionally and mindfully, you know, mourn the circumstances that I mean, this life is full of suffering. It's what it is. You know, we can't minimize that.
Thank you, Derek. And you mentioned holding space, and I want to come back to that here in just a second, but I see Julie's hand went up. So Julie, go ahead.
Well, I also was very, I almost say inspired by seeing that bit about mourning, as I thought about, with deeper and deeper awareness in life and paying more attention and getting out of that trance, I see with greater clarity who I am in a moment, of course, but and who the people around me, at least in my perception, are. And when that happens, while I'm saying hello, oh, hello, grouchy moment, or, whatever, I'm also saying goodbye to the idea of the fine, upstanding, really sweet, kind angel woman that I might have at some point, another moment have thought I might be, or my perfect, gifted kids who really are pretty gifted, but they're far from perfect. They, seeing them as the wonderful, real people that they are, you're also saying goodbye to those ideas and those bits of clinging, and whether, even if it's liberating, to let go of all of that crap that we drag around with us, and these presuppositions and these ideals. It's wonderful and liberating, and also it's like, oh wow, yeah, I may never actually hike the Appalachian Trail, or you're not ever going to run a marathon. Shut the hell up, whatever it may be. It's letting go comes with a sadness. That's all, a bit of mourning.
Yeah. Thank you. And Julie, so what you talked about kind of definitely dovetails into Derek and what I think a lot of people are bringing up. But Derek, you use this term holding space, and I know we've used it many times before in our conversations. And I think sometimes holding space can kind of feel maybe foreign, or kind of like the new term of the week. And I'm just curious, when we talk about holding space, because really that's what this chapter very much was about, was this notion of not bypassing these feelings, right? And there was this really interesting part where he talks about this notion of where was it in the chapter about the observation, right? So he talks at the 137, it says, another technique, especially for those who may be less inclined towards silent sitting meditation, is to learn to distinguish between the language of observation and that of evaluation or judgment in our thoughts. Because I think when we're asked to do these practices, right? So we had like several practices this week that we are focusing on. We're it's not like we're just sitting there just focusing on our breath. We're recalling these situations that need to be observed and kind of work through. And so when we talk about this notion of holding space, so what's the opposite of that? If we're saying, okay, I'm going to hold space for something, if I don't necessarily know what that really means, what's the opposite of holding space?
Distraction.
Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, I'd say a responding.
Okay. Like kind of knee-jerk responding, or
Kind of like, so the example I would use, this is what I was kind of thinking about as you were talking, is holding space for either myself to have those feelings or thoughts,
mm-hmm.
and not really responding to it, just allowing that to happen and not getting upset at myself or that type of thing. Just, all right, it happened, that type of thing. Or doing that for someone else. They're getting angry at you, or they're allowing space for them to have that thought, but not responding to it. Yeah. And allowing that to happen, and then maybe that flows a little bit easier in and out.
Okay. Nicole, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, silent judging is always one of my, just quietly judging things is just a default of mine that I'm not too proud of.
Yeah, almost rumination, right?
Well, yeah, passing judgment on whatever's happening. I've always got an opinion. And even Derek jumped in and he said judgment and direction, trying to fix, trying to correct the person's reactions and expressions.
Yeah. So not really dealing with or sitting down with what's bothering us, right? So I always think of like ruminating is kind of the opposite of like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be mindful of this problem, but now I'm going to ruminate on it. And I'm no longer really keeping myself open. It's like all of a sudden it's just like the walls are narrowing in until I'm just holding that negative judgment or whatever towards myself or yeah. So
Julie came up with a great term in the chat. She said constriction, smallness, rejection.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I really think we should look at these practices as allowing us to have that space, that observational space without the judgment language, right? Without the harshness, the critique. Because I think a lot of times, we're just trying to make it through the day, and the last thing, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have issues. We're going to have these thoughts arise just because that's the way our mind is. But how do we process through those? And I think having some of these practices, because that notion of self-forgiveness, that first practice and self-acceptance, I think really are kind of hand in hand. It's like there's a letting go, there's a freeing, where we talk about constricting, it's a broadening of our minds or our hearts to kind of allow there to be that spaciousness. I don't know. It was interesting. So just self-disclosure, I've had a lot of stuff going on the last couple of weeks. Like last week, my mom broke her leg and had surgery. Then my cat died. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in a country song. Next thing I know, my car is going to get repossessed and my wife's going to leave me. And then I'll be a real yogi and go practice. No, I'll just ruminate, and so Monday, well, yeah, I think it was Monday, right? I had done laundry and work got busy and I forgot, and I live in an apartment complex with other people and we have a laundry room. I completely forgot that I had started laundry, completely forgot. And then I remember we got a text from the apartment complex saying, hey, whoever has their laundry down there better pick it up. And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, I'm so tired of people leaving their laundry down there. They just really need to just screw them and throw it away. And I thought, oh, that's terrible. I shouldn't think that. And then I was right to go to bed and I noticed my laundry basket wasn't there. And I thought, oh my, yeah, right. And all of a sudden, all the negative thoughts started flooding in, but my success was I was aware of the negative thoughts flooding in, and instead of thinking like, kind of like in the book where it's like, oh, you idiot, oh, you dummy, it was instead like, oh, how embarrassing, oh my gosh, I could do better even though I didn't, but not to really hold, right? How human. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so the video, because I actually had picked this video out before all of this started happening. And so I want us to, the video we're going to watch is Marshall Rosenberg. And if anybody hasn't seen his other videos, I highly recommend. He's the one that talks about nonviolent language. Really great stuff out there. So I want us to watch his video. So let me share my screen.
Can we send that to Putin?
So there, okay, let me get this out of the way. All right. So let me.
So I'll be forever grateful to four feelings that I have that tell me that I'm thinking in a way that I want to transform, that I'm not living in that world that I want to live in. And so I'm so grateful Mother Nature put these four feelings in us human beings, because they tell me that I'm not thinking in a way that is natural. It is a natural way of thinking. And I'm thinking in a way, in fact, that is contributing to violence on the planet. These four precious feelings are anger, depression, guilt, shame. I can't think of four things that have helped me more to learn nonviolent communication than anger, depression, guilt, and shame. Because if you want to learn a foreign language, it very often helps you to translate one language into the other. So every time I feel one of those four feelings, it's a language lesson time. Gives me a chance to transform the violent thinking going on in me into a language of life.
All right. I have never had this happen before where all of an ad kicks in. Give me 1 second.
Let's think of a mistake you made fairly recently. Within the last year or so, maybe yesterday, but think of a mistake you made that in some way made life a lot different than you would have liked it to. Maybe it's something you said, maybe it's something you did, maybe you said it at home to your child, maybe you did something to somebody. Whatever it is, think of an action you took or didn't take that we would put under the heading of a mistake. Okay, got that in mind? Now, I apologize to those of you who are perfect. You'll have to skip this exercise. But if you want to participate, use your imagination. Just imagine you made a mistake, okay? But if even that's too hard for you to do, you might enjoy just sitting there feeling superior. Whichever. But for those of you less than perfect, thinking of the mistake, I'd like you to think of what you said to yourself when you saw that you made the mistake. This exercise I'll be having us do requires us to become conscious of how we speak to ourselves when we're less than perfect. And if you can't recall exactly what you said, I'm sure by now you have a pretty good idea of how you speak to yourself when you're less than perfect. So either remember or guess what you said to yourself. And let's hear a few of these so we see how you talk to yourself. Yeah. I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand it anymore.
Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are?
When will I learn?
When will I learn?
Self-righteous.
Self-righteous.
I'm a genetic jackal.
That's advanced NBC.
I'm an, what kind? A jackal? I'm a genetic jackal. And then what was the last part?
That is advanced NBC.
That's advanced NBC. Oh, I like that jackal. That's a.
What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me?
I assumed again.
I assumed again. And is it accurate of me to predict that implicit in that is that's not a good thing? Because sometimes we abbreviate, we don't put the actual judgment in there, but we know from the phrase that I did this again, it means it's wrong somehow. Why do I always do that? Questions also do that. They are another way of implying some kind of wrongness. Isn't that accurate? Why do I always do that?
I'm a fake.
I'm a fake.
I should be more.
I should be more of something.
I found different rational reason why it happened as it.
Pardon, I didn't hear.
I find different rational reason. I analyze the situation.
Analyze it.
Oh, it's maybe because of that, and
So you give yourself psychoanalysis.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. I can always blame it on my parents. Whatever I do.
I'm a dictator.
I'm a
And
dictator.
it doesn't help if I think that I'm a democratic dictator.
I'm a dictator.
This will put my promotion in danger.
This will put my promotion in danger.
About she is using me.
She is using. You judge the other person for your mistake. Let me write that down.
I'll never figure it out. I might as just give it up.
I'll never figure it out. And what's the diagnosis behind that?
I'm hopeless.
Hopeless. I'm hopeless. I'm a hopeless case.
I am a destroyer.
I'm a destroyer.
I destroy something.
I'm a destroyer. Okay, so now seeing that I was programmed to think that way, I've been working hard to transform that thinking into a language of life. Because I think every one of those messages that I tell myself, if I see what I call the truth, it'll be a precious message, and it will help me to learn without losing self-respect. So I want to, whenever I do make a mistake, I want to learn from it without losing self-respect. That's some language I use when I refer to this. Other times I would say it this way: I want to learn from my limitations without losing connection with the divine energy within myself. So they both mean the same to me. For me, making mistakes can be very precious if I can learn from them without losing connection with the divine energy within myself.
Yeah, I'm going to call it right now. I think I
use language like I've heard here, and it's certainly how I was programmed to think. I don't experience myself at all as connected with divine energy. Quite the opposite. So whenever I have thinking like that going on, I found that my life gets transformed in a wonderful way when I can translate this into a language of life. A language of life. A language that gets me connected to the life in me that was not served by what I did. And as I've said, more concretely, it means what need of mine was not met. But whenever I do use this word need, I like to associate it with divine energy, because I believe that needs are evidence of divine energy. And that's pretty hard to get to that jump from the cultural association I have with needs, which are needy, weak, dependent, about everything negative. But in fact, I think that it's the most precious thing I can get in touch with, the life energy within me. Whether we want to call it the life energy, the divine energy, the best word I've found for it that I can use in English is need. It can connect me with most people. So I'm going to recommend the following exercise, that you go into groups of 4, and for each person in this mistake, help them to say, how would they have expressed this to themselves in need language? What would they have said to themselves to help them to see the need of theirs that wasn't met in a way that would help them to stay conscious that this is divine energy, these needs? So how would that have been said, these messages, in that kind of language? How would we have said this to ourselves? Secondly, help the person empathize with the divine reasons they made the mistake. See, what we call a mistake simply means it was the best way we knew how at that moment to serve this divine energy within ourselves. Or if you don't like that word divine energy, because you came out of a violent spiritual training, then to be conscious that what we call mistakes was the best way we knew how at that moment to meet a need of ours. So help each person in the group, after empathizing with themselves, what need of theirs were they trying to meet? Or didn't get met, rather. What need of theirs didn't get met by the action we're calling a mistake? How to put that into a language of life so the person doesn't think they did anything wrong or bad. Just and let's call this mourning. Mourning. See, that to me is a very important part of being alive, whether we're an animal or a human being. To mourn when life isn't being served. We don't want to be happy. We felt happy when we weren't getting enough food, we'd starve to death. So we want to have some discomfort when a need isn't being met, but we want to do this in a natural way. That's what I call mourning. To see a need of ours was not met. Life wasn't served. So that was the first thing you'll help each person do. How would you have spoken to yourself to just be conscious of what need of yours wasn't met by doing this? And then after you've helped the person to mourn, help them to engage in self-forgiveness. See, in giraffe land, in the land of nonviolent communication, forgiveness and empathy are the same thing. Because when we empathize, there's nothing to forgive. See? Forgiveness implies this old game of, if you forgive, if you confess your evilness to a saintly person and they're saintly, they will forgive you. And no, not that game. Not that game. Empathy and forgiveness are the same thing. When we see that what a person does, somebody does something to us that doesn't meet our needs. When we see the good reason why they did it. Good reason defined, it was the best they knew how to meet their need at that moment. That's forgiveness. When we see that person did that for the same reason that every human being does everything they do. Everything that we human beings do is the best we know to do at that moment to meet our needs. So when we empathize with that, there are no bad guys. There are people who do things that don't meet our needs. Well, now here we're talking about ourselves. We did something that didn't meet our needs, but we don't want to see ourselves as something wrong with us for doing it. We want to see the good reason why we did it. Good reason defined as the best way we knew to meet a certain need. So help the person to say in a language that they resonate with something that captures what need they were trying to meet by doing this behavior we're calling a mistake. Now, sometimes we will see that these two needs are the same. That we did something that didn't meet a need. Well, what need were we trying to meet by doing it? The very need that didn't get met. The strategy was just not a very effective strategy for meeting the need. But sometimes what we did was good to meet one need, but at the cost of another. So for each person, help them to see what need they were trying to meet by doing what they did. So then you will have helped each person to get clear how to mourn in this situation, mourn in terms of seeing the need that wasn't met, and how they would like to have said that to themselves differently than they did. How would that sound within the self if they had said that to themselves? And then help them to empathize with empathy with what need they were trying to meet. Any question about that exercise?
Okay. Feel like this is a breakout room exercise? Well, guess what? We're not going to do a breakout room. We're going to do it together. We're going to do it as one big group. So let's start with my example, right? So Monday, forgot my laundry downstairs after ridiculing how terrible people are for leaving their laundry in there. And then I really felt terrible when I realized it was me. And so I don't know. So his first thought is, what was the need that did not get met?
Maybe a need for mutuality or even belonging, like belonging or community, that community kind of has these agreements to move the laundry along.
Yeah.
What need did it not meet? That's the question to you, since that was
Well,
your,
I mean, I could talk
experience.
about. I mean, I could talk about the emotional experience I had was, embarrassment, right?
Yeah.
And embarrassment of, one, that it was me that forgot it, but also embarrassment that I just ridiculed mentally to myself of people who do that when in fact it was myself that did it.
So maybe it was, and like what ended up resulting was you were reacting to was the need to feel competent in being able to uphold your part of the social contract that's there to be respectful of others as far as the laundry and stuff like that, like feeling like a competent individual that can uphold the agreements that you have with others, and expecting other people to have it, expecting other people to hold that up as well. So I don't know, that's definitely where I would go if I were in your situation, which I've done exactly that thing in many different things where
Yeah, so Lauren had put to respect and be respected, which I think is probably definitely a need. That not only did I not respect others, but also really it was myself. So And you know, we were talking about earlier that kind of judgmental, like I'm going to ruminate and judge other people silently. You know, how that was terrible. You know, when really it was myself, which for me I thought was hilarious because of course it was myself. It's always myself.
So it was both skillful and unskillful.
Well,
because you caught yourself. And I must say I laughed out loud. I thought, what a perfect lesson.
right.
You know? And then what you do as a result of that, but it's you know, both things.
Yeah. So then he talks about this notion of using a language of love. So in my example, what would be a different way of speaking to myself? Because obviously sitting there thinking, oh, I'm an idiot or I'm stupid, how could I forget that laundry is not, I mean, that's very aggressive, violent language, right? As he was saying.
Laughing at yourself, like really going, wow, seeing the humor.
Mhm.
And I think what the other person was talking about was all about holding space. Rosenberg, he was talking about holding space. He was talking about all these concepts that we make these even a bad thing when they could have just been an event. You forgot.
Yeah.
I'm distracted. I have a lot going on. I mean, we're grateful to you. You have a lot going on, and you lead our, you lead our sangha. So I would change that to, just more self-love, like go, look at me. I don't know, have humor about it. That's the hardest thing sometimes I find, to make light, to lighten it up.
Yeah. I definitely like to use humor to deflect too.
And just a sense of gratitude, like being grateful that you have a washing machine that you can go use, and a dryer, and clothing and water and detergent. We live in a pretty luxurious society that allows you to just have that opportunity to go do that.
Well, and I was just thinking grateful that I was the one that caught myself rather than walking down there and a neighbor's already doing laundry, giving me the side eye or something like that.
Then the management showing up and berating you with a letter.
So what are you gonna do if everybody notices that you were the guy in apartment so and so going forward?
Oh yeah, no, I mean I always fess up to silly stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, see, like to me, that's like if I get to the core of the ickiness of this stuff, right? It's really my own self-centered thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like you're gonna think I'm a bad neighbor.
Right.
It's all really about me.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the starting spot where I come from in this. And so I've got a lot of work to do. But really at the core of it is this self-centered fear that you're gonna think I'm a bad neighbor, you're not gonna like me,
Well, and isn't that the need right there? Isn't that the need is to be the nice neighbor, to be the respectful neighbor, the civic person, because that's, for me, that's how I was always raised. My family would say that's how you're raised, right? You're raised to be neighborly and kind and, the Boy Scout and all that. So in a sense, there's a deep rooted need to have that like fulfilled in a sense.
And that's your value system, and that's why it hurts, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to make them a pie or something.
I'll make myself a pie since I was the one that.
Well, and I mean, if you caught the situation, like there was probably no animals harmed in the making of this snafu. Like the majority of the suffering, I would assume, if it was me in that situation, would be, kind of the me coming face to face with the fact that my own perception of self and my own sort of egoic protectiveness is been compromised.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, outside of that experience, it's just okay, this is just an event that took place. But I mean, I would be personally mortified and would be suffering for days after that.
So what's some love language that I could have used? One of the things I was thinking to myself, I think Fanny definitely brought one that I like to go to is a notion of humor, laughing at myself, right? But, sometimes we can use that in a very harmful way, so we have to kind of be careful with that, because we could be like, oh, I'm the fool, I'm the clown, but what's another way that I could have, like, maybe just calling it out as I saw it, instead of trying to put like, oh, you're stupid, just be like, oh, you're so you were so distracted, it's
were
okay.
human. You were human.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. You're reminding yourself that you've had all these things going on in your life over the last day or week or whatever, and just letting yourself go a little bit easy, on this situation because of that. So
Yeah.
maybe it's a little bit more loving.
Well, and also, oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Nope. I was just going to ruminate.
Well, I just also think for me, it helps me back off myself if I think about how I would talk to a friend or even a child. Because also a lot of times when we're in those really contracted emotional spaces, we aren't much more than some of our kind of more emotional childlike selves. And I would probably be much more compassionate to calm somebody down and say like, oh, you've had a really hard week, or on and on, and I think it's just about kind of like last week we were talking about making some space between our emotional reactions and our judgments of them. And then I think once we have that space, these are the types of things that we can say to ourselves and understand that about what might be going on there, to give a more compassionate response to ourselves.
I like that. Yeah, one of the, I would say, because he talked about, we use mistakes to learn, not to ruminate, to harm ourselves, and for me, I feel like that example, I really learned that, like, I need to have space for, people are going to make mistakes, so seeing those as other mistakes, and not having that kind of that judgment in the back of my head. It's like, oh, that's terrible, or something like that, for other people as well, as I should hold that kind of compassionate love, that language of love, of like, I'm human, I made a mistake, it is what it is, in a sense, that then can also kind of have that natural outflow to other people. So all of a sudden now I have this sense of patience and acceptance of the way the world is. So the next thing is this notion of kind of self-forgiveness, I think really kind of ties into that, that working and allowing things to let go. I have found in my own particular practice that when I hold on to tight onto something, that's where the suffering really comes up. That we've kind of talked a little bit about, that rumination, or just, I always talk about it as like holding on to the baggage, right? We hold on to it when we know we need to let it go because it's familiar, it's comfortable. That's just the way our habit patterns are set. And so having that self-forgiveness allows me to really let go of all of that, to even let go of the story and the concepts, because that's one of the things I really appreciated from this chapter. And in fact, I used it for our social media. And of course, once I read it after I posted, I was like, maybe it might be misinterpreted. But right, so, and this is on 138, right there in the middle of the paragraph. Well, actually, I'll jump up a little higher, right? So the end of that first paragraph says, if we examine them carefully, none of the statements is actually about the facts, right? So my statements to myself really weren't factual statements, right? I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, how could I do that? Those aren't fact statements, right? Those are judgmental statements. they are, as he says here, emotionally charged prejudices, assumptions, generalizations, our reaction to what is actually happening, which is simply this: there is a slowing down in the checking process. That's all, right? And so we need to challenge our evaluative thinking and other habitual thought patterns, especially our self-concept. To me, I feel like that's what Buddhism brings to the table. When we get down to it and we think about Buddhists' two, method and wisdom, wisdom is all about this paragraph. When we say, well, why do we need to understand emptiness so much? Why do we need to, think of all these like very high level teachings on emptiness, about no self and all that? It's because of this, because we have such a strong, tight hold onto a self-concept that we can't let it go. It's hard for us to switch from that judgmental language to a more observational kind of love language, as he was talking about. And he goes on, he says, each of us has internalized from our cultural, social, childhood experience a particular representation of ourselves, a self-concept that exerts a powerful influence on our everyday life because it affects how we perceive as well as experience ourselves as the world around us, right? So when I was talking about my situation and how I want to see myself as neighborly, as civic minded, the good Boy Scout, respectful of other people's, those concepts are very much ingrained due to my family and the way my experiences through childhood. I mean, that value system is very structured, it's very deep rooted into my mind stream, and so I have that concept. And so when I deviate from that very lofty concept, all of a sudden I experience suffering. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. I'm stupid, right? All of a sudden those harsh, judgmental language comes in. And so that's why I think when you all are saying, oh, you're just human, that is such a good thing to remember, because, to be human is to err, right? To have flaws. And that's what he says. There's nothing wrong with having a self-concept. The problem is that we just fail to appreciate that it's just a concept, name and form. That we're no longer rigid in our labels, and we become freer, right? That's where I think a lot of the freedom that the Buddha talked about is that freedom of those concepts that kind of box us into a corner. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I like the idea of, like, bring it on. When you have made that mistake, another angle, or not angle, another lens, and you're able to see the humor, or just a forgiveness for yourself, or your life flashing in front of you, that you were raised this way and you have these habitual tendencies, and this is another lens of self-clinging and ego, to just go, bring these experiences on, bring them more on, bring them on, so I can really purify. I mean, when we're in that space of allowing ourselves that, because we are human, it's almost like the invitation to go, this is what causes this is what makes me grow, as much as it sucks. Because by us even saying, oh, it sucks, we're acknowledging it, not bypassing it, but we're still staying in that vibration, which has to be, we have to move through that. I get it. I don't know if that made sense, but
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And our purpose is not to walk around and be superior, but just to learn. I mean, that's what a great learning. If I'm just observing, and not evaluating, I would say maybe, so I thought I had gone beyond criticizing other people. I have not. What a, what a learning. So I still have that to.
I also think, kind of bringing it back to our understanding of like compassion and loving kindness, all of a sudden when you start to work with this, at the beginning it says, how, that Tsongkhapa quote, it's like, if I do not have peace myself, how can I help others find it? There's an interesting thing that happens, that when you really start to break down those concepts and those rigid constructs that you're holding for yourself, all of a sudden that breaks down for others as well.
Right.
And then that compassion naturally wells up, because you start to have compassion for others who don't have that, and you see them struggling and causing their own suffering in a sense. And that's what I love about Buddhism, because that's the compassion of the Buddhas, from their wisdom, right? From that wisdom, this natural spontaneous outflowing of compassion, because they recognize being suffering is due to their own misunderstandings, and so they want to reach out and try to benefit other sentient beings. And all of a sudden that wellspring is pretty deep and constantly flowing. Nicole, your hand went up.
Yeah, that was one of the things that he brought up in the video that I really loved, was this idea of seeing people as doing the best that they can, at that moment. And I think that that's such a liberating thing, like, I'll just admit to being the only one here with family issues, and like, when I was able to see my father as doing the best that he could in raising us, I was able to love him in a whole new way, and it was freeing. He could be whoever he was. I didn't need him to give me what I thought I needed, and so I really appreciated that part of the video when they talked about that.
Yeah. That's actually a very, very powerful. Yeah, Terry.
Surprisingly enough, and I don't know where this came from, except that I knew I did not want to be the way I was raised. So I fought tenaciously not to be like the people who raised me. And yet when my children would make mistakes, I felt so much grace toward them that I would ask them, okay, sit down, and we'd say, okay, what did you learn from this? And they would talk about it. And then it would get to the point, as they became older, they say, I know, Mom, what did I learn from this? Well, tell me, share that with me. And yet it took me forever to be able to internalize that to myself. And I don't know why it took me so long, but I had to give myself that kind of grace. And I never could acknowledge that I was just human. I had to be so much better than just human because I had to be what I overcame. And so many of us have had to overcome so much. So I guess I'm just a slow learner, but at least I was able to be there and do that for my children, regardless of what the motivation may have been. Yeah. Thank you. This has been a wonderful, wonderful session.
Yeah, one of my kind of affirmations to myself is slow and steady and stuck in first gear. That it's just like I'm chugging along. I'm just chugging along. I'm hoping to get there. But yeah, thank you. So as we come to the top of the hour, I just want to say we have several practices. I hope you've been getting into them. If you haven't, definitely try them. I know not everybody is full on like I love sitting all the time, but try to just be a little mindful to do those the definitely the self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, and then if you can do the self-kindness practice. But I like the fact that he gives us this informal practice for off the cushion of just being aware, just being mindful of that negative self-talk, and not to necessarily beat yourself up over it, but instead to just say, oh yeah, these are just thoughts, these are constructs, these are interpretations, and then looking at ways that you can reframe them with that kind of using the language. And that's why I love that video, because he talks about it being the language of love, loving kindness, wanting you to be happy, not wanting to suffer, not necessarily romantic love or some other type of love, but I just want to be specific. Okay, anybody who hasn't talked that wants to say anything, let's just give a few minutes. Well, I do appreciate you all. I agree with Terry and everybody else who nodded their head. Yes, this has been a really wonderful discussion. I feel so much better. I've forgiven myself for the laundry. It's a learning moment. Hey, Nora. So next week we're going to get into chapter 8, which is just like me, which is expanding our circle of concern. But keep doing these practices. If you need, as we're moving forward in this chapter, I think it's really good to keep these practices and our kind of methods, so that even though we're moving forward, we still always want to kind of come back and do a check-in, and if we catch ourselves to utilize that self-forgiveness, self-acceptance. So don't think as we move forward we're done with that practice. It's always going to be there for us. So, well, again, I do appreciate you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy Tibetan New Year to everybody. Starts tomorrow. The next 15 days are considered the 15 days of miracles, where Tibetan Buddhists specifically, well, I think others do too, but we focus on spiritual practices, a little bit more intense than we normally have. I know we were doing this Bodhisattva challenge, but maybe spend the next 15 days, give yourself a mini challenge to really get into your practice a little bit more than what you've been doing. And then on the 18th, we're going to do another kind of online puja for Chochol Duchen, which is the Festival of Miracles. So